drinking good water can trigger a relaxation response. That's intuition. That's the gut instinct. When something strikes you as just a little off, it triggers stress. And that stress response is something that you can perceive. And that's just a doorway. I love breath work because it's the doorway to connecting with yourself, with the part of you that's not the five senses. So no matter how you get there, once you start paying attention to other than the five senses, you can learn. And just like you learn to get better at golf, you can learn to get better at feeling things and seeing things and connecting with things. And I think that's what they call spiritual evolution, when you connect with that higher self. The earth itself is a giant magnet. And that's sort of in our animation. And there's like a magnetic field around the earth. And the earth's crust, it's like the rind of an orange. That crust is basically made of quartz. Most of the earth's crust is made of silicates. And so the magnetic field of the earth is making the earth's crust hum. And all of the water in it is humming to the same sound.
Welcome to the Gamma Seeker broadcast. I got to interview Dr. Richard Nahas, a real pioneer, in my opinion, for doctors who are stepping forward, creating flagship companies that are going to change how we view natural and wellness products. So Dr. Richard Nahas started a company called Vicus Water, and it's a flagship company. He's not expecting it to go global, although it already is. Canadian spring water company that ozonates the spring water and then restructures it based on some proprietary and patented material. And it stores it in glass. Right now, his product is holding structure for up to 3 years. It still hasn't lost structure, honestly. I asked him a lot of very intense questions around his patented technology, what he's using in order to create that within water, which has really been unprecedented. We also talked about the plastics in waters, some of the biggest scams out there in quality waters, and how to measure your pH. We break down a lot of complexity and make it as practical as possible, but the conversation around water is relatively endless. Very happy to talk about Vicus Water as it's part of my team. I actually was able to try a whole palette of this product and truly believe that what he's creating is going to help us restructure our water if we don't have the tools that we need to do it ourselves. But we also talk about that. I have my parents on the product, and they also can taste and feel the difference having Vicus Water in it. So it was an honor to talk to him about this technology that he's been inventing, and I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. I have the honor and privilege of opening this conversation up with Dr. Richard Nahas. Am I saying that right? Dr. Richard Nahas.
Yes, you are.
You have a beautiful background. You have bridged both the medical and the Western world with the culture. Is it Iran? Are you from Iran?
My family background is from Egypt and Lebanon, and my wife is from Iran.
Okay.
And so that part of the world has been a big part of our lives for sure. But we were both spent most of our lives here in Canada. And
there's a ceremony that I feel like a lot of Egyptian and Iranian cultures have around tea making or coffee making or sharing beverage. And I was wondering if you could just entertain the audience a little bit about your miracle accident in a lot of ways.
By miracle accident, you mean structured water?
Well, yeah, and the simplicity of how it came to you and the kind of the divine. I'm sure it was kind of an interesting moment in general. So,
yeah, well, in our part of the world, the common way to drink water is from a carafe. In ancient times, they were made of like a porous clay so that a little bit of the water would evaporate and it would keep it cool. That was, I think, how water used to be stored. But it's got a little spout and you kind of pour it out and it falls into your mouth. And so you have to learn how to swallow while you're drinking. So some people can't do it. They fill their mouths and then they have to stop and swallow it. But that's an interesting point from the perspective of breath work and just controlling the muscles of your throat. But anyway, About 10 years ago, I became really interested in collecting crystals as just beautiful objects. So we had this one large crystal cluster of quartz on our coffee table. And at the time, we had installed like a reverse osmosis water filter in our home. And, I would add a splash of lemon juice to. And one day, on a whim, just the carafe was made of glass, and I filled it and took a sip and then just set it on the quartz crystal. I thought I'd just see what would happen. Don't know where that idea came from, but the next morning I saw it sitting there. I said, "Oh yeah, there's that water thing. Let's taste it." And it was a completely different feeling. It was a shock, actually. So I had my wife taste it, and we said, "Yeah, this is really interesting." And for the next few months, whenever we would have friends or family come over, we would play this game where we'd give them a glass of water and have them take a few sips, and then we would add a little bit of this crystal water. By this time, the carafe was sort of permanently sitting on that quartz cluster. It was part of the piece. And 2 out of 3 people could tell that there was a difference when you added some of this water to that water.
Well, I certainly can. I've been trying your product for a few months now and have gone in and out of it, simultaneously experimenting with an atmospheric water generator, which has no structure, by the way. And I do feel like your water has a surface tension difference that's quite palpable and more noticeable after refrigeration. And I would say 2 out of 3 people with decent taste buds. I would say the blander taste bud people, there's maybe a different in texture when I would get them to swish it around their mouth. But I've been enjoying the product, and I can feel that it like kind of holds more light, if that makes any sense. And that's how I would always describe water that's structured. It makes you feel more hydrated, and you're a little more energized, and your cells feel like a little more squeaky clean versus that purified water. If you drink purified water for a week straight at a music festival, you kind of can feel the clay that has built up inside. And your water kind of feels like it's got extra glitter, like it's sparkly. So now that people have kind of been opened up to what we're going to talk about, I want to dive right into my personal questions for you. And that is, what have been your experiments with water? So it started with quartz, and that's part of your sequence and process of making your Vicus water. However, what have you done personally since then? Like, what's been your other experiments with crystals and water?
Well, my connection with water is actually a little bit older than that. And for some reason, I never really connected the dots. You know how life works. Sometimes you only see the pattern in hindsight. But, I'm a Pisces, whether that means anything to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're in your nature. My name is Brooke, but I'm a fire. So I'm surrounded by Pisces. That. My whole family is Pisces. Thanks for telling me that. That gives it an angle.
And I think I've had a few experiences on the road traveling. My story is that I used to be an ER doctor, and then I spent 2 years backpacking, studying traditional healing. And that's how I got into this integrative medicine phase of my career. And there have been a couple of moments of, we'll call it connecting with the clouds.
Yeah.
And recognizing that all of the water in the world is kind of one body of water, and it's all connected.
Part of the same field.
So in terms of experiments, we're now members of this really cool multidisciplinary Center for Excellence in Water Research in the Netherlands. They're called WETSUS, and they have an interest in water conservation, desalination, wastewater recovery, all of that conservation level stuff. But they're also unique in having a group called the Applied Water Physics Research Group. And there's a group of about 20 companies that are pitching in to support PhD level researchers who are working with professors, publishing water science.
Are you part of that? Like, I know that you're a company,
Vicus is this beautiful water experiment that's kind of having this amazing longevity in holding the structure of the water after it's been bottled, which is great. And I feel like it could immediately start to compete in the Saratoga bottle market, in the sense of you're at a high-end spa and all they have for glass spring is Perrier or Saratoga, neither which is structured. So I think that your work Vicus has an opportunity to really be a new offering in that niche.
I love that sentiment. That's where we're going with the idea that we've created a new category of functional water. So you don't have to add CBD to your water or flavors to make it special. The idea is that we've stumbled into this recipe where the ozone that's used to bottle water already can be harnessed by quartz. So every bottle of water has to be ozonated to make sure that it's safe to drink. And that ozone is a very charged particle. So it reacts with whatever's around it. And that's how it disinfects things. But when that ozonated water comes in contact with quartz, the electric potential energy in the water makes the quartz hum. And so quartz is piezoelectric. That's why it's in electronics, because you can pass an electrical current through it and make it vibrate in a very specific way. And that's what makes your watch go. And that's what makes record players.
Or microphones. Microphones are my favorite. Yeah, because it's like that pressure. It's that sight, like when we rub the skin, it's the pressure that creates that electrical charge.
Exactly.
So when you are putting the water through the ozone, which kind of breaks it up, and then you're adding the quartz back into it, and you're saying there's a hum, is there like an intense pressure that the water is being moved over the quartz? I'm sorry if I'm stuck. We can edit this.
No, that's fine.
You don't need to say anything.
It's a great question. I mean, we have a patent that we're hoping will be granted, but we did experiments with a lot of different concentrations of ozone, and when you talk about pressure, the thing that we varied was the flow rate, how fast that water is flowing through the chamber. And it seems that both of them affect the outcome. And so we kind of found a sweet spot that works best. And we have identified some really unusual things about water that we want WETSIS to study further. So we started with our in-house research and we kind of passed it on to them. And they have our instrument now, and they have started to compare, for example, natural quartz versus synthetic, tumbled stones, singly terminated versus highly included. And then, when we understand better whether there are different properties of quartz that affect the process, then we can start looking at other crystals. So this is a really interesting subject. And at first, so I'm the only medical doctor in the group. Everyone else is kind of a hardcore scientist, engineers, chemical engineers, and they really are happy to have me there, because our work it came from everyone's shared interest in Victor Schauberger. Have you heard that name before?
I am the least familiar with his work. I came into water research through Dr. Emoto, and then I performed the rice experiment with my family. It was life-changing for the whole neighborhood. Changed our life to do the rice experiment and really see it. And then introduced to Veda Austin Works, and I've been doing the Petri dishes for that stuff. Like, I'm still playing with it. So Schauberger's I haven't really touched, but please
Google him. He's a really interesting guy. He was a forestry person in Austria, and he wasn't an engineer. He just kind of lived in nature, and he saw things and observed and listened to nature was his dictum. And he found a way to modify the flow of water in rivers to allow logs to more easily be carried down the river. And he developed these tools to create vortex spirals in water. And that was one of the first ways to restructure water.
Yeah. So even just spinning it, right? Is that was one of the first things I was taught to restructure. Exactly. It was to break up the big chunks, vortex it clockwise for 30 seconds. That was my first probably tip into it.
Yeah. So there are a number of ways to change the properties of water using magnets and light and electricity. And so the group is studying water structure at the atomic level, but we're also doing some projects on health. And yeah, we'll have to stay tuned for those results. But it's been an amazing journey because water is everywhere. It's the most ubiquitous thing in our lives. It's the most essential to life, but it's stunning when you learn that there's very little science that's being done on water.
At this point in your career, how would you define water?
Water is many things. That's how I would define it. Is its moldability, not just in physical form, but in terms of its function. I think of water as a little magnet, a little buzzing H2O molecule, which has this property that makes it unique in the universe. There's no other substance like it. And I think that water is what makes life possible on Earth, not just because of hydration, not just because of all of the coincidences about water's structure and its properties. You know, if you read about water, you'll hear that water is unique because when it freezes, it floats, and that makes it possible for all of the life in the oceans to survive. That's one of the ways that water is unique. But water seems to be able to connect with our minds and with consciousness. And of course, some people would say God is in everything. God is everything. God is everywhere. But I think the place where we can connect with consciousness is through water. And, you know, the reason that we are conscious beings in part is that we're mostly water. So I think water is life. We'll call it that.
Yep. What do you believe it means to be a doctor today?
It's a very unique gift to be a doctor because it's the modern day equivalent of the priesthood, where you have this institution that has given you this blessing of being able to devote your life to helping people. And it gives you a degree of credibility and trust and respect that, you know, you have to take very seriously as a doctor, because even though, you know, the profession has faced a lot of challenges recently, most notably through COVID, I think that it's an individual decision how you're going to express that sort of inner desire to serve. As a doctor, you can be a specialist, you can be a generalist, you can work in a hospital, you can work with babies, you can work with the dying, you can do lifestyle medicine, you can work in Africa. I just attended a workshop to learn about stem cells. And so I think it's a very unique thing that allows you to express who you want to be. But you do have this tie to an institution and a profession. And there's a level of expectation that leads you to kind of walk two worlds always. You have to be mindful of being a member of an institution and representing a profession, but you have to be true to yourself. And you can get caught up in money or status or this sense that you're so important or that the world revolves around you. But most of us get grounded every day just by taking care of people who need help and helping people and have them say thank you and mean it. That's a blessing.
Thank you. I really wanted to ask that question, but I didn't know how it was going to be received. In the wellness industry, there is a lot of people that are doctor shaming. And what I want to do, just like I do in breathwork, is just draw more lines and create more vocabulary around how many different ways we get the opportunity to show up for each other, but where there are differences. And I imagine it was very difficult, COVID, amongst you doctors to come together or feel divided or feel conflicted about how you wanted to show up for people authentically, but feeling like you needed to represent an institution, and this institution kind of holds things over you in a lot of ways. And I feel like the police officers, when you get close to them, you see that there are wagers that they're put on their salaries and their pensions, and because they're part of an institution. And I just feel like creating some softness for people to see doctors as just people with a lot of conflicted feelings with institutions that, for all of us are impossible in some ways. So how you guys show up for people to me is super difficult. I don't want to deal with victims all day. I couldn't imagine how you psychically have to wash yourself to come home and be with a family man. So I am, thanks for, in my opinion, being on the good side. When I sit down with doctors, I often divide them of, okay, are they on the good side or the bad side? And I have my own different derivatives of what that looks like. But I am curious, you are a doctor, but you are stepping into the water business. Can you tell me about why?
Well, my work has been focused in a very specific way for about a decade now, around the same time that water became a part of my life in this way. So, as a medical doctor, we're taught all this stuff, and then we go out into the world and we use it. And many of us at some point recognized that we weren't given all the answers, and we wanted learn more or do more so that we can serve people in a more complete way. And so, when I started my career, I was doing functional medicine. I was balancing hormones. I was treating the gut microbiome. I was doing detoxification. I was using supplements and learning to use my hands and learning about the acupuncture system. So I had a broad range of tools. And eventually, I gravitated to treating chronic pain, and I use injections to treat pain most of the day. And I stumbled into this idea, this concept that seemed like the biggest thing in the whole world to me. And I was introduced to what's called neural therapy by a colleague in my town. And neural therapy is practiced by over 30,000 doctors around the world. It's been done for almost a century. It comes from Germany, but it's virtually unknown in North America. And the concept is such a no-brainer. It's rooted in the fact that the places where you've been hurt before are sensitive. And if you want to help the body heal itself, you should treat those spots. So, you've had a surgical procedure, you've fractured a bone, you've been bitten by a dog, you've had 11 infections in the same tonsil. All of those areas are places where the nerves are sensitive. And sensitive nerves trigger a stress response, and that tightens fascia. So the places where we've been injured are places where blockages occur. And neural therapy treats these by injecting them with freezing to turn off the stress in those areas for a while so that the body can flow, so that tissue fluids can flow in the meridians that are typically stuck, and that the body can restore balance in all of the system as a whole. All of those circuits are open for a while. So recognizing that I never learned anything about this in medical school seems to me to be the biggest deal in the world right now, because 150 years ago, we learned that germs can hurt us. And the germ theory of disease transformed medicine, saved millions of lives. And there's this other theory called the blockage theory that was given a bit of attention by neurotherapists a century ago. But here we are in medicine and in wellness and in functional medicine, and we're looking after people who are struggling, and we're trying to do all of these things to help them heal. But this really dumb, simple concept has been overlooked. So my mission in life is to add blockages to all the textbooks of medicine. And I just stumbled into water through this serendipitous experiment. And I think, nothing happens for no reason. I have this sense that there are very few people who can bring together the different credentials and skill sets and the personal insights and all of that to do this. So it's sort of like, if I'm not going to do this, who will?
You made an instrument out of crystal that restructures water and it hums when you use it. I mean, yeah, they have like mythological legends about said instruments that change like the structure of rivers and waters. And I do want to ask, because I know that ideally the patent goes through, you license your water and your water tech around the world. That's ideal. I've been curious, would your water tech work on large bodies of water, like a lake? Or would it have to be like funneled, but it could it work on a large body of water?
Absolutely. I think that we're just beginning to understand the world that we live in. And the world that we live in is alive. Frequencies and vibrations are the language of life. Everything that's alive is perceiving what's going on in its environment by processing vibrations. Everything you see is processed vibrations. Everything you hear, touch, taste, your nervous system turns those into electrical impulses that your brain interprets, and those are frequencies. So a body of water is equally programmable, whether it's in a bottle or in a lake. But I think I would love to have the science to back that up before I make that claim for sure.
Oh, that's okay.
I can tell you that that's been my personal experience, that, you can connect with bodies of water in a way that you can feel.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about, I was wondering about pumping it through like rehabbing. That's just say an area where the water has just been like completely mistreated.
Oh, yeah.
Like the Nile River is a really good example, but there's a lot of river systems that are dealing with blockages, that are dealing with densifications, and as above, so below. And I'm in the world of trying to get people's fascia to flow via teaching a mighty breath and teaching a sequence they do at home. And I was just an athlete looking for answers. And all I was given by the doctors were cortisone shots. And they suggested an early hip replacement. And I'm an athlete. I don't want to stop training. I live for movement. Like there has to be more options there. And unfortunately, the PT options and the TENS and the ice and the hot, like it got me nowhere. My inflammation was just worse. And I took matters into my own hands. I just took responsibility. I was not the victim anymore. I was going to figure this out. And a foot injury led me to kind of going down a rabbit hole with fascia. And by seeking out all of the fascia release techniques, and there's still more to learn. But at that point, at 28 of them, I was like, okay, I got a pretty good idea of the data pattern within this. I had made my own little 8 rules, and I used a tennis ball because I couldn't afford a rolfing session for 7 weeks in a row. And I fixed it. In 2 weeks, my hip click that I've had for 30 years went away. And then I introduced it to my mom and dad, and their knee pain went away. And it's very simple. There is a sequence to it, and hydration is the number one rule. So the first thing that I teach people is that you can do everything right, but if you are not hydrated, your body does not have the tools it needs in order to plump to the surface. So in my world, I'm always teaching that like the water sucks in from the outside. And when that happens, our electrical barrier also goes up because our energy becomes low. And when we start to have good structured water with a little bit of electrolytes, and then we start to breathe mighty and we have no stagnant water in our body because we make the fascia flow. I highly recommend sweating a couple days a week to all my clients, because if you can have all the hydration in the world, but if you're not moving your body and you're not sweating, it's not going to reach the tissue. And I feel like that's so overlooked in even just common athletics. Like I was not taught about the fascia as a D1 golfer, and it's everything. Like it's everything to a golf swing. That's how we're generating momentum and leverage. So I feel like, how is this not, whoa, like when I saw the spiral line for the first time, I was like, this is going to change. Like, this is how we should be training. This is the next level of toe dexterity. And in my own experiments, my drive has increased by 40 yards. My dad, my brother, they're like, you're ready for world long drive, Brooke. Your stats are there, which is just funny because it's happening by accident. Those are the beautiful things in my opinion. But
I wanted to ask, how do you define hydration?
Well, there's two levels. Hydration obviously is a numbers game in terms of whether you're deficient in total body water stores, whether you're replacing what you're losing, and whether your body is in a state where it's saying, okay, we're good, we've had enough, or whether your body is crying out for water. You may have run into that book by Batmangian called Your Body's Many Cries for Water. Oddly enough, he's an Iranian medical doctor from the 70s. He wrote this about how, headaches and irritable bowel and low mood and fatigue and all of these things can be signs of dehydration. And when you think of fascia as long sheets of tissue that literally rub against each other and hold everything together and create long chains of movement, it makes sense that if you're dried out from the inside, then those sheets will be more stuck together and they'll be less supple and flexible. They'll literally be stiff.
Can I show you the model I've been using with my people for fascia? Because it's one continuous web. I've been using a sponge.
I love it.
And it explains
Great.
loose fascia and densification. So I found a sea sponge that has little sand particles in it. And I'm like, so what do you think happens when you're dehydrated all the time and you're sitting in one position all the time? Like it starts to clump together.
I love
when
that.
we're younger, yeah, to me, I was so excited
And I love that because all living things started with fascia. Everything else that is in our bodies, it's not like fascia's holding it together. It all kind of grew out of the fascia. The fascia came first.
like a sponge.
So most primitive living things are made of fascia, and a single-celled organism has a connective tissue called a cytoskeleton.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of fascia too. But let me get to the second kind of hydration, because that's the part that's really interesting for me. And that is that when you drink, your body doesn't just respond to the contents of the liquid that you drank based on how much water you drank or what the liquid is. Your body also has a reaction to everything that you put into it. And when you drink and your body is needing water, you shift from a mode of stress to a relaxation response. So when you drink good water, you trigger a relaxation response in your nervous system. And that starts with your throat and travels into your diaphragm. And so, drinking water is very related to breath and to the diaphragm and to the fascial system as a whole. Because as you know, all of our fascial chains attach to the diaphragm. The arms are pulling into the diaphragm. The legs are tethered to the diaphragm. The head and neck come here, and the base of the heart is attached to the top of the diaphragm. So this is literally, the pump of your whole being. And when you drink water that's not so great, your body resists. If the water is not humming, there's less of a relaxation response. If there's, small amounts of chemicals in the water from the tap, regardless of how many, your body has a response that is sort of like, I don't want this. And that can interfere with the relaxation response, which is part of hydration, because when your body relaxes, it also absorbs. So, your physiology shifts from yin to yang. And, when you're in yin, you're relaxing, you're resting, you're absorbing, you're nourishing. When you're in yang, you're reacting, you're resisting, you're pushing, you're tight. So hydration is about filling the tank, but it's also about, when it's with good water, it's about relaxing the body.
I love that. Such a good answer. How do you measure water structure?
You can't, because water is too fast moving and too elusive. So you can only infer water's structure in most living systems by the properties that it has. So if you see that water has changed in its properties, you have to assume that there's been a change in its structure, assuming you didn't add anything or take anything away. We infer the structure of water from the shapes of snowflakes and crystals of ice. And we can also, in one specific case, have you heard the name Gerald Pollack?
Absolutely.
So he's done some really cool research using polymers, membranes, and he's shown that water tends to structure itself naturally around what you call hydrophobic membranes, similar to the membranes of the cell. That's the reason that he's doing this research, because his whole inspiration was when he read this book by another scientist from 50 years ago who said that the cell depends on structured water for everything that it does. So Jerry is using Naphion, which is the name of the polymer, to show that water tends to structure itself on either side of those membranes. And so that's a very specific application. But the lab at Wetsus has some amazing machines that can be used to measure all of the different properties of water. Right now, one of their PhD students is getting ready to defend her thesis looking at how quartz and other substances can affect nanobubbles in water and how that affects its structure. So, I think that the short answer is, I don't know, but you can taste it and you can feel it. And our project is to see whether we can demonstrate that drinking structured water actually affects people's health in a measurable way. Those are the studies that are still missing. So we know that we can observe it, and we know that we can measure the properties of water that are different. And that's how we know that Vicus is structured. 3 years later, those changes are still noticeable and there, but science is not done, it's just getting started.
I feel like the next natural question has to be then, when you're using Canadian spring water, so it's beautiful water that you're already sourcing, but and then you're restructuring because you did the ozone. So then how are you measuring it to say, oh, this is structured back?
We did experiments on the water from the spring before it was ozonated and compared that to the water after it was ozonated, the standard bottling process. Mm-hmm. And we compared that to a third sample, which used our process for restructuring it. So raw water, ozonated water, and restructured water measured at day 1, 2, 7, 14, 28, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years.
Cool.
That was the work that we did. And now all of these other questions will be answered by Wetsus.
That's fun. That's fun that you have the research kind of coming in or lining up. At least it's kind of, not just a question that will itch at you forever and ever. I'm excited to ask this. What do you think is the biggest scam in the water industry?
I might get in trouble for saying this. I think alkaline water
a lot of people are starting to say
not necessarily better. And this is relevant to a lot of folks who are in wellness in general. Because, I'll just dial this back a second. And it helps that I have a background in the sort of the integrative medicine space, because I've spent 20 years talking to folks about everything they do and learning about what they do and attending conferences and talking to exhibitors. And I've had a real broad exposure to the industry as a whole. So where this comes from is the fact that you should be alkaline. And specifically, your blood pH is very tightly controlled at 7.4. If it deviates even the slightest amount, you get very sick. But that's the blood. The fluid that your cells live in, what's called the extracellular fluid, the tissue fluids, can become very acidic or very alkaline depending on what's going on. If you have an infection, the bacteria will produce acids, and that will make you acidotic. And so that's a good example of how pH can be different for different reasons. And if your body is chronically inflamed, one of the things that's been observed over time by naturopaths and functional medicine providers, not necessarily proven in double-blind studies in the journals that I read as a doctor, but in the wellness world, one of the things they recommend is measuring your first morning urine pH. So, if you want to be well, you are encouraged to buy a little roll of pH paper and leave it on your toilet. And every morning when you pee, after a few seconds, they encourage it, the midstream urine, you put that paper into the stream, not into the toilet, but into the stream of urine, and see what color it is. And you can match it up to the strip, and it will tell you whether you're acidotic or alkaline at the tissue level. And you should be eating an alkaline diet anyway, because most plants are alkaline, and most of the things that make us acidotic are meats and animal proteins. And I won't get into the whole carb keto debate. I'll just say that everyone thrives on a different diet, and you should find the one that works best for you. But this whole thing about being alkaline led people to think that if they consume alkaline things, that they'll be more alkaline. And that's not the case. So, as an example, one of the best things you can do to promote alkalinity in your body is to add a little bit of lemon juice to your water. And lemon juice is an acid. But when you drink it, it stimulates your body to become more alkaline. And so the short answer is that I think alkaline water is not special, because you don't become more alkaline when you drink alkaline water.
Thank you for saying it.
Did I step on any toes there? Does that consistent with your thinking?
I think that you are saying the things that people have been needing to hear, because wellness is a beautiful market, and there is a lot of scams in this market, and there is a lot of confused buyers that are trying to do the right thing, and they have questions, but no one with real authority is outlining the answers. The companies are. So the companies are like, this is why you should buy it. And someone who's just not curious enough, not to ask enough questions, they will just look at the marketing material and say, that looks good. That's probably good for me.
In fairness, I wouldn't necessarily call them scams, but I do think that it's sort of like a push and pull, right? These companies see a demand, and they'll launch something to meet the demand. So I think
I have lots of opinions about things about that. Like
there are scams too, though.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot.
There's a lot of misunderstanding, put it that way. The human body is extremely complicated. And one of the reasons that medicine will always be in a special place is that no average person who has a health issue can expect to solve it on their own, like without help from anyone. At the very least, you need to see a medical doctor to make sure you're not missing something serious. And then if you really want to shorten your journey, of course, you have to take ownership, but it helps if you meet a few people who know what they're talking about along the way, and they can point you in the right direction.
I find that there's a lot of people right now confused about the authorities, confused about doctors and trusting them. And that's why I feel like to create a line instead of the doctor shaming, it's creating more questions. I feel like a lot of people have gotten themselves into a situation where they didn't ask enough questions. They didn't have enough curiosity. They didn't take enough responsibility maybe for having the conversation deeper. And I think a lot of doctors lead with fear, and it puts people in stressful situations already on top of a stressful body. And because of that, there is a little bit of confusion, to say the least. I think industries are kind of changing around us. Religions are changing, governments are changing, and I would love for people to come back to health, because I feel like the body is the temple. And doctors who are teaching people to come back into their health by needing all of these external things, but getting them back into that resource within them. I think that's our only way through the loops that we're in. That's our only way where the future generations can have more peace and harmony, because we're tripping over stuff I think that we should be past. Joint pain, and also like the toes are weak. Is the joint pain just a solution because the feet are weak and we're walking on our feet? There's so many things to look at. What do you think people could do that are listening to this right now to improve or at least question their own water quality?
Well, if you're drinking tap water, you should filter it in some way. If you're serious, you should probably find another source. Anyone can structure their water at home using a number of different tools, but if it's still tap water, you can only do so much. There are really good sources of water available everywhere. Ours is not the only one. I don't think everybody should be drinking Vicus. I think I would love to see a world where everyone is drinking structured water. And the reason I launched Vicus was to create awareness about that, sort of like a flagship brand. So, if you want to add a splash of Vicus to your water, you will feel the difference. But if you change your water source or filter your water or do something to structure your water yourself, whether it's playing music for your water or putting a crystal in your water or talking to your water, connecting with your water, maybe my medical colleagues will tell me I'm spouting unproven nonsense, but it can't hurt. And I think that at the very least, recognizing that water is something precious that you should respect and that you should think about the quality of your water is the first step. Once you start thinking about it, you'll find the answers. So I think asking the question is the first step. How do I make my water better is the answer to your question.
That's a great thing. I'm going to add removing plastic from my water was a kind of a,
oh my goodness.
It took a lot more thought and planning than I had thought, but also there was an immediate feeling of improvement in my skin, in my kidneys, in my body.
Okay, here's a life hack for people who are not in a position to not drink a plastic water bottle. I was just speaking at a conference. I was in a hotel, and it was either the tap water or the plastic water bottle. And it was 11 o'clock at night, and there was nowhere else to go, and I was thirsty. So what do? You are careful not to agitate it. You open it carefully, and you slowly pour out the top half of the bottle, because most of the microplastics have settled to the bottom. So the last thing you want to do is shake bottled water before you drink it, because then you're just going to make sure that all the microplastics are nice and mixed up in the rest of the water. You don't want to drink a bottle that's been sitting out in the sun. You definitely don't want to pour, if you're using a plastic cup at a party and people are pouring drinks and mixing drinks, you don't want to pour the alcohol into that plastic cup, because plastic is made of petroleum, and alcohol dissolves in petroleum. So you'll get way more plastics in your drink if you put the alcohol in first. So put all the water in, then put the ice in, and then put the alcohol in so that you can reduce the harm. This is a little bit silly, because obviously you should stay away from this, but thinking about it scientifically allows you to start seeing the plastics that you can't see with your eyes. If you can see those plastics with your mind, then you don't really need willpower to avoid them. It's just disgusting.
Well, it brings us back to the earth. Makes all of us want to be potato farmers with a little lake, you know?
Amen.
Do you, there's so many questions. Can I have you for another 20 minutes? I know that you're at the end of your day. Do you have another five
Sure.
questions and four
Yeah,
questions in you?
I'm not expected anywhere soon.
Okay. I have 10 more, but I feel like 4 of these are the ones I'll get.
You need some water.
I had the pleasure of interviewing Veda Austin. And I asked her, how do you speak to your water when you drink it? And she said, I ask water to bring me what it needs, like what it thinks I need. She's like, instead of demanding something out of it, I ask it to speak to me. How do you talk to your water?
Nice. I usually just say hello and I tap it. I just connect with it and then drink.
That's beautiful. So you're opening the conversation with water. And my introduction to water research was Dr. Emoto, who I thought was brilliant. But when put with a different lens, you're demanding water, you're intending water, you're telling water. And like a lot of the low level magic, I'm well read. So I was a golfer, I'm a musician, I play like 6 instruments. So we can take it in a lot of different metaphors about sound and cymatics and structuring the water inside of the body just with our voice. In low level ceremonial magic, they teach intending and affirming and speaking. And I always felt like it's such a cute introduction to how we are interacting with the interstitium around us. And I think the fascia will end up being the bridge for people to see that there are muscles outside of the body. And as we supercharge the electricity and we get the stagnation and the blockages out of the way, the energy outside of us turns back on. And I think all of us were very familiar with these feelings and sensations as children. And we are taught to be in a more stimulated world. And in the stimulation, in that nervousness and the fear and the anxiety, we are too tense to open our consciousness up to what's happening outside. But they've proved that 30% of people have a super sensitive nervous system, meaning we inhabit space. I don't think it's 30% of people. I think it's way more than that. It's just a matter of how relaxed we are, how safe and comfortable we feel in our environment, and how we've trained ourselves to feel safe and comfortable. Particularly under pressure as an athlete or a musician, you step on a stage and people can feel if your attention is divided or if you're fully present in the flow of that song. And I think that the energetic and the health are one and the same. When we experience the health in the flow, we can experience greater levels of cognitive function, brain function. I think resonance between the brain, breath, heart, and fascia. I had a personal question. I've heard of this stone through my network that heals large bodies of water. And you're a man of crystal and a man of water. Curious if you've heard of said magical stones.
Well, before I answer that question, I'll just say I really appreciated what you said about being able to perceive other things. One of the things that convinced me to go ahead with Vicus was that my son, who was 3 at the time, he's 12 now, very gifted boy, never liked to drink water, would always refuse to drink water. And the first time he drank this water, he loved it, and he's loved it ever since. There was this crazy story. I'm going to tell you this story because it's meaningful to me. When he was 9 months old, there was a day when his mom was changing him, bathing him, and I was on the other side of the house having a shower, and there was no soap in the shower. And I called out my wife's name a couple of times to see if she could find me a bar of soap. She didn't hear me, so I used shampoo. And when I got out of the shower, I dried myself off and I walked to the bedroom where my wife was with our son. And she said it was so weird. I was just putting his clothes on and drying him off. And he just looked at me and he said the word soap. So, there are things that happen to you that shape your worldview, and they're not necessarily double-blind studies, but they're undeniable.
Have you heard of the telecyte? The
No.
mysterious cell inside of the fascia, and it looks like a nerve. I
Oh,
feel, yeah,
yes.
they don't, when they refer to it, it's the mysterious telecyte. Like it's very
Hmm.
ill defined. And I don't know if any current research is going through it, but the
Interesting.
studies on telecytes from fish, like from the early nights, was that the telecytes would allow the fish tissue to change from solid, like it just change ever so slightly based on the salinity of the water that the fish was in. So
Mhm.
I've been very curious if the telecytes within our fascia, because they do look so much like a neuron and an axiom, if that may be responsible for those truth hair fibers that stand up when someone speaks a word of truth. And there's this sense of, I call it, we have an iron bar of truth within us. And when someone strikes it, whether you like it or not, it will resonate.
Right.
um, but I,
Well, medicine has a term for this, and I was really pleased to see that. I don't think they know that they're doing it, but they're building a science of intuition. And it's called interoception. And interoception is now studied by pain researchers and neuroscientists. And it's the ability to perceive things within your body generally. And that's a part of the definition. The broader definition is everything that we perceive outside the five senses. So, uh, your body has you remember when we talked about how drinking good water can trigger a relaxation response?
Mhm.
That's intuition. That's the gut instinct. When something strikes you as just a little off, it triggers stress. And that stress response is something that you can perceive. And that's just a doorway. When I teach practitioners how to find blockages in fascia, we use light touch to find spots that feel different, that trigger a sensation. And I love breath work because it's the doorway to connecting with yourself, with the part of you that's not the five senses. So no matter how you get there, once you start paying attention to other than the five senses, you can learn. And just like you learn to get better at golf, you can learn to get better at feeling things and seeing things and connecting with things. And I think that's what they call spiritual evolution, when you connect with that higher self.
I
And
think there's a
maybe it may
sense
be
of,
in a cell, but I think it's a property of your body as a whole.
okay, yeah. Well, and then it's exercise, like any muscle, like learning how to speak takes years for us to learn how to control just our tongue to articulate. So in my opinion, there are lineages of teachings around the world. We live in the information age. This is our moment to call the temples and be like, what did your wizards do? In my opinion, there's a total pattern in the wizardness and people who were either transcending longevity, transcending what we would call supernatural powers or telekinesis or telepathy or like projecting. There's so much literature. There's so much literature that supports the mystical monks that are alive, that are 1,200 years old. And in my opinion, it's like, if we know that, if 10% of what's published in literature and findings over the last century is true, then we are so suboptimal. And breathing at 4 breaths a minute with an open and flowing fascia with supercharged electrons should be our baseline change of notes of, okay, all right, from this position, guys, the battery of our body is souped up. What can we do from here? And in my opinion, the more instruments I learn, it's just patterns. That's why people who play a certain number of instruments, you can just keep adding and learning, because it's just finger dexterity. Once your fingers are turned on, you're just telling them to press or hold or play. It's all just, can you feel the song or are you not feeling the song? And with sports, I feel it's the same. It's when golf is a leverage sport, it's not a static training. I'm not just like standing in one spot and lifting a weight. It's a lower body leverage, like a hockey player, or in a gymnastics. Like most people can't do a backflip, but to do a backflip, you have a push pull in the midair. And that experience changes your relationship with like your cerebral spinal fluid. It changes your relationship with hip thrust and not throwing your head back. You got to keep the head tucked. And there's these different areas. And how, to me, the more we learn, the greater the expression in the electricity that we get to have. So we can want spiritual connection, but unless we're out there in the garden getting sweaty, getting dirty, feeling our bodies, sweating it out, like how much of that circulation of sweating and drinking water under the sun and being on the earth is part of a baptism, that's maybe overlooked for people.
Well, there's so much to unpack there, right? If you're barefoot in the soil and the sun is shining and the birds are singing and your muscles are moving, there's all of this nourishment that's coming from all of these different places. But what you say about muscle memory with sport and music, I think is essentially it's about learning to control yourself, learning to control muscle movement, learning to be aware of things. And I think it's the same with perception and awareness. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah. It's funny though. The action itself is so out of control. Tumbling is so out of control. The violence of a golf shot is so out. Like there's pockets of control and then out of control. And it's like in that dynamic of expansion and contraction that I think when people play with it, we get closer to like that bridge of yin and yang.
Sure.
It just keeping a compost pile. We get closer to the concept of life and death, and I think it's trained. I think health can be witnessed in the garden and growth and expansion can be seen in a lot of ways. And as much as I focus on health, and I'm sure you do too, there's so much that makes a soul nourished and happy. And music, it's nice to hear you talk about sound because I think music can heal a lot of the unseen for people.
Music makes us feel. There's no basis for that. It doesn't make sense. Don't get me started on music, but because
okay, another time, another podcast.
I love
I'll do
music.
that.
My soul resonates more with the arts than with sports. I do a lot of, I cycle, I run, I row, but I was never like a team sport guy. I was always really deeply satisfied by music. I love music.
What's your favorite stuff to listen to?
Honestly, lately it's kind of a joke. In my office, it's a requirement for one of the treatment rooms anyway, that we're always playing Hawaiian music, this sort of ukulele.
Okay.
Because, I'm doing injections and people have pain and it's kind of nervous, it hurts. And honestly, when we listen to the ukulele, it's like we just feel like we're at the beach and we're happy and relaxed. But in the other room, we play the oud.
That's the oud. Yes.
That's a really beautiful stringed instrument from the Middle East that I love. But, when I work out, I listen to Led Zeppelin. And sometimes I must admit, I listen to Taylor Swift. I have a kid who's 12, so I'm getting dosed with pop culture now. So it's fun. But I think great music from every genre can move you,
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of all of it, just to fit the mood. What mood am I in? What music would complement that? That's beautiful. Absolutely. I'm more of a Black Sabbath with Ronnie James Dio than a Led Zeppelin girl. Wow. But I love it all. I used to train on a treadmill, like singing Led Zeppelin, to learn how to belt and keep my breath under control.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's fun. It's, inspirational music, but there's some good stuff I'd love to introduce you to now that's come out in Europe. There's a band called High Lung, and it means healing. And they sing in a few different languages. My band never sang in English, but we played 30 instruments, and then we would go through countries. So we'd had like a Turkey set and a Russian set and a Celtic island set. And then he played the oud and the saz, and I played the harmonium and the tempura. So we had like a little Indian.
Oh.
Yeah, a different kind of music is needed now. Landscape music where the brain can fly and experience. And to me, that's in vowels, like consonants affect the sound differently. And I've done my fair share of, I think, very sacred, very overseen, very sequenced medicine ceremonies and mushroom ceremonies. Like in my family, we kind of have a check-in, you know what I mean? That's like how we were taught. That's how we were raised. My family's like spiritual, but in a way where we're connected to the earth and the trees here. Like we plant trees on birthdays, and like, you know, that tree's 10 years old and we planted it on Dad's 45th birthday. And so I live on a piece of land with my family and we're surrounded by water, and we live in the tropics. So I get to plant all the time, and I have 4 seasons with my bees here. And as we get to know the water, you can see that the water is kind of damaged. You know what I mean? So as I've been noticing, like, okay, our canal, our lake, it's connected to all of these other canals and lakes. And, you know, this is connected to Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades. And the Everglades right now are kind of being like there's a lot of media around what's going on down here, and people trying to buy the land because you can't do anything with it. People trying to protect the land because it's the central part of cleaning. It has its own, and it's kind of like the fascia. Like it's not quite land, it's not quite water, it's the Everglades. It's like it lives in both arenas in a lot of ways. And as I look at my water, we've been doing music experiments on it. And as I've taken mushrooms, I've played music to the outside. And I have this amazing piano. It's an upright Yamaha, and its uprights are just these giant harps, right? So when I play and I'm tripping, I have synesthesia. And so the piano is just columns of light. And it's like, how do you guys not see this? It's amazing. So when I sing with these columns of light, as soon as I use a consonant, it chops it. Like a consonant just stops the energy from traveling. But if we use vowels, which is what is made up of light language, ironically, and Dr. Jaffe is someone that you might be interested in knowing. She left being a psychologist she's like, this is my great work. And she's like, everybody thinks I'm a total loon, but she's like, this is my great work. And just her energy itself is very grounding, how she feels about having to leave the institution to do what she felt like she had to do. But in the light language, which I know very little bit about, but Enochian is the same. These other languages are the same. It's circular. The vowels are more open. And when you sing, like an opera, you can kind of float from vowel to vowel without kind of coming down. Ironically, Ronnie James Dio has this ability to clamp down on vowels in a way that rounds you out as a singer. So if you sing opera, but then you also train with Ronnie James Dio, you learn how to play with these vowels of shape and these vowels of slice. It's like I can feel Ronnie James Dio, like he was a samurai with how the vowel shapes were. Sorry, I went on that tirade, but
That's fascinating. Well, I think I won't comment too much on the mushrooms, but you know, whether other people see what you're seeing or not, it still shapes you. And synesthesia it's not nothing. It's a thing. There's something really happening. And this insight about the consonants cutting the flow I think it's meaningful for sure. I think Sanskrit has been a little bit of a hobby of mine. That's like the oldest language, and the sounds are intentional, unlike many languages that just kind of are happenstance. So yeah, I think when I listen to music, I prefer no lyrics too, but vowels are all right.
Yeah, I'll send you a song when we're done from Hailang.
Yeah, send me that. I'd like that.
Yeah, it's in another language anyway, so even their words don't feel very interruptive to the mind. You know, I feel like I can still travel with them, but it feels like there's a trend right now. There's this undercurrent of almost indigenous feeling, like a heartbeat coming back, like a little rebel call in the
Oh yeah, this is
music.
for sure what's happening in the world today. Definitely, you know, whether you talk about healing, where people are cutting out the middleman and taking responsibility for their own health, or whether esoteric knowledge is becoming more accessible and people are pursuing it. There's a massive shift happening where all of these institutions that ruined everything because they wanted to control everything. And, you know, not that they were all terrible, but they're all human, so they're all fallible, and they're all eventually fall victim to the temptation of power and corruption and abuse of power. It makes no sense that we're dumping garbage in the only planet we have to live on. It makes no sense that we're poisoning our rivers. And I think everyone who's conscious right now is praying and trusting that we're going to wake up in time and we're going to turn things around and that it's not too late.
I had
But
a
it's a mess.
dream about 6 months ago. I'd love to share it with you because it's brought me relief and it's brought me hope, and it gives me a surety that we're not doing the right thing. And in the dream, there was this black mass. I was like far away from it. And this black mass was moving in a direction. It looked like raisins or ants crawling on top of each other. And they were being guided by this outer edge. And the outer edge, I could use this word with you, you'll understand it. Other people wouldn't get it. It was like nothing could touch this outer edge, but everything was moving in response to this outer edge. The dream zoomed me in. And the outer edge, it was me and it was Alex Eck. And it was a line, it was just him in the dream that he had happened to be there. But we were all monkey armed together, like linked in arms, literally. And we were laughing, smiling, and dancing in the face of utter chaos. Like the entire mass of people, you couldn't connect with. It was dangerous to connect with them. We needed to connect with each other. That was like the feeling of the dream. And connected to each other, we could stay in this like merriment, like this indestructible, impenetrable boundary of merriment. And in this line, we stayed together and we moved everything behind us, like it followed us.
Cool.
And we just needed to stay together. And that's how I feel like, yeah, this is go time. Like we are either going to correct it or we're not. I believe we will. I believe the inventor's already here. I believe the information is already here. We just need to come back to the resource, and we need to have enough energy to do the right thing. When people don't have enough energy, they're going to do the easy thing 100% of the time. So we got to get them mighty again. That's where I'm at. Making people mighty. If we don't make them mighty, they won't care enough. We can open up all the boxes of truth. They won't care enough. They won't have the energy to help to make it better.
All you need is love.
We need good water.
There you go.
We need good water, and that can help get us started on the way to love, because I think it's an energy.
Love, laughter, and living water.
It's becoming more of a part of thing. There's more magic in it. Have you done any studies with tourmaline in water yet? Or selenite in water?
No, selenite is a different kettle of fish, but tourmaline's quite interesting because there are a group of crystals that are piezoelectric. Not all crystals are. Tourmaline is interesting because it's also pyroelectric. So piezoelectric means when you pass a current through it, it'll buzz. Pyroelectric means it'll warm up because it's emanating infrared light, among other things. So I think tourmaline is a beautiful crystal in general, and it probably does some interesting things. The reason that we are so interested in quartz is that I'm really all about bringing water back to where it came from. And I'm going to take you on one more little tangent.
Yeah, let's do it.
So if you remember, the Earth itself is a giant magnet, and that's sort of in our animation. And there's like a magnetic field around the Earth, and the Earth's crust, it's like the rind of an orange. That crust is basically made of quartz. Most of the Earth's crust is made of silicates. And so the magnetic field of the Earth is making the Earth's crust hum. And all of the water in it is humming to the same sound. And when you look at the way quartz crystallizes, when you look at the three-dimensional structure at the atomic level, of course, it makes these sort of hexagonal shapes that look like ice crystals, but it makes these helix shapes, these helical strands of crystalline quartz that have a lot in common with the structure of DNA. So I think that there's something very profound about how the water on Earth has been structured by the quartz in its crust. And that is why DNA has the shape it has on Earth. So I don't want to mess with other crystals at the moment. I'm all in on quartz.
Wow, that explains that to me. Okay. All right. I appreciate you going through that. You're all in on quartz. That is not the
And
answer I thought you were going to give me.
collagen itself has the same shape. Collagen
The
is a
triple
triple
helix.
helix as
Yeah.
well. So this idea of a triple helical structure creating a crystalline polymer, it may also be shaped by quartz.
So interesting. All I have are ideas and experiments that I want to conduct. If you had
You're a seeker.
an infinite budget, no budget in the world, what would you either experiment with or build for humanity? Like, what would you want to prove? No budget.
Well, I think the most urgent thing, I'm thinking practically, I'm not thinking, in 500 years. I'm thinking right now. What I'd like to do is make wireless technology safe again, because we're all living in EMFs and we can't escape that. And it's becoming more prevalent with every spaceship that Elon Musk sends into space to drop off yet another satellite in the Starlink network. It's absolutely absurd to think that your cell phone doesn't affect your body. And it would be so straightforward to add a few specific frequencies to cancel out that stressful effect, to restore the normal frequency of the earth that we belong in.
Yeah.
So that we could live in a healing environment again on this planet, right? Because you probably have come across this. This is another piece of esoteric science, but I'll dump it in there. The Schumann resonance was first measured by a German guy named Schumann in the 50s. He was a radio technology guy. And basically, lightning strikes all over the earth all the time. And that electricity creates a charge that makes the atmosphere that we live in also hum. And the frequency of the Schumann resonance that the atmosphere is humming in is 7.83 hertz. And that's the same frequency as the alpha waves in our brain. So there's a theory that our sleep-wake rhythms are in tune with the atmosphere of the earth. And until 150 years ago, this planet was electrically silent, right? So that was the metronome that our whole bodies thrived on. So that's one more cause of stress that is going to become bigger and bigger over time, that has such an easy fix. So I would love to build a device that would cancel out all of the electrical noise in our wireless world.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that share. I went through my whole trip in my head with you doing that. I'm living in the country with all of the things that you would need to live a low EMF lifestyle. And there's 3 towers. And they installed one without talking to any of us. And so here I am, like feeling like I'm doing all of the things and it's encroaching on us. And it's like, okay, I just need to get a little more acquainted. And I've stumbled upon some biogeometry science. I've stumbled upon people that instead of just doing it for their one house, they're doing it for their whole community. Because every house in my neighborhood is affected by this 3rd radio tower coming in. And it's just kind of curious. I love that you just took it in that direction. Thanks for thinking of the globe and the humanity and where we are the guinea pigs right now for so many things. And in my opinion, I've already watched 2 of my dear friends develop cancer at an early age. And so it's all be mighty. And we were golfers. So we were on the most chemicals 6 days a week, all the time. So they had stage 3 lymphoma. Why they both went through chemo at 25. I did fasting and I had crazy symptoms that made it look like I had a lot of poison blood or fertilizers in my body, or drugs. I mean, like I was having a lot of adverse reaction to an 18-hour water fast. So I got clean. But I feel like in my generation, I'm gonna have to hold space for brain cancers. Like in my pockets of people, my athletes that have been in nothing but commune like with nature, but they work at a call center and they have a headset on, or they have earplugs in all day,
Yeah.
but they're
There's a lot
outside.
of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons to be stressed out about the world we live in. Maybe the last thought I can give you is that what I always tell people is that it's really easy to get into a headspace where you're drowning in fear and worry by all of the threats that surround you. And the path that I choose and the path that I suggest for everyone is to just build your resilience and focus on the fact that when you're good, nothing can touch you, or the things around you are much less of a threat to you. And so, I have people who see me who have fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome. They're chemically sensitive to many things. I've done a lot of environmental medicine over the years. I'm very familiar with, the science around all of those issues. And my message to those people is don't live in fear, because, you can do what you can do, but you can't do it all. There's always going to be something. So don't sweat this stuff you can't fix and build your resilience.
I love that. I'm grateful for our pocket of time tonight. And thank you so much for seeing us after you've already given so much today. And I'm grateful for our pocket of time. And I know that this may have gone differently than expected. And I wanted
No, it was a great conversation. You're a beautiful soul. It was a pleasure to get to know you.
Thank you. I hope it's just the beginning. I think that there's a lot of work to do LinkedIn arms around the world right now.
I like that theme.
Yeah.
Laughing monkeys.
It's just hope. Like when we stay in a mighty place, I think that we become hydrophilic to the sad energy. And if there's a team of us holding that kind of vibration, that to me makes everything able to rise. If we can resonate a different frequency, humanity can follow. But if there's not the leaders that step forward and vibrate and make it look fun, then we don't have a shot. So it's, to me, if we all come together, we all share our gifts and our knowledge and our wisdom. And in the information age, people have so much access to knowledge, but they keep seeking for something different. They're looking for that thing that's going to fill them up with fulfillment and with enthusiasm. And that doesn't come unless you are really seeking your wholeness and your trueness. And you have a lot of truths to share with people tonight. And I appreciate you. Thanks for being on the Gamma Seeker broadcast. You are my fifth one, and just happy to have this kind of info available for people. Is there anything that you can say before we sign off?
No, I think I said enough. I appreciate everyone who's out there trying to make the world a better place in so many different ways. And I think for people who are seeking, water always becomes a part of what they need to seek out, because there's a lot of things that you can do to make your life better, and don't stop seeking. That's the message.